Okay, so Mistral is back, and this is after a long time without a lot of releases from them. If we come in and look at their research here, because the word I'm going to talk about today is Mistral 3, and their previous new model releases that were just updates is literally 5 months ago, which has got to be the equivalent of multiple years in the AI world currently. But they are back, and they're definitely chiming in on the question that people have been asking over the past few months of, is Mistral really just a set of models for Europe? Like, are they kind of irrelevant now with all the Chinese models having taken off so much? So clearly Mistral is not going to agree with that, and this release probably backs up their whole point here. So this is Mistral 3, and they've actually released 4 models in here. So the naming and the numbering gets quite confusing. The main model that they're releasing here is Mistral Large 3. It's interesting here because in the past, Mistral has tended to release open versions of their smaller models, but not perhaps their largest models. So Mistral Large 3 is a 675B mixture of experts model. If you remember, Mistral was one of the first companies to release an open mixture of experts model almost about 2 years ago now, with the original Mistral model, which from memory I think was an 8 by 7 billion parameter MOE. So this is clearly one of Mistral's key frontier models here. And this is a 675 billion parameter model with 41 billion parameters active. It is very interesting that the amount of parameters active is a lot more than what we've seen recently from things like GPT-OSS, where you've generally had sort of 5% or under of the parameters active at any moment. And even from the Qwen MOEs, they've tended to be smaller with a lot smaller active parameters. So along with the Mistral Large 3, the really big model, they've also released 3 small, dense models. And these they're calling Ministral 3. And in some ways it looks like these are perhaps a replacement for Mistral Small. I think the last one was Mistral Small 3.2. But for me, one of the big wins here is that not only have they released the sort of instruction-tuned models, they've released the base models for each of these. So we've got 4 new base models, 4 new instruction-tuned models. And for the Ministral models, we've got reasoning versions of the models for each size, so even going down to the smallest one. Alright, so if we look at Mistral Large 3, the benchmarks that they've released basically put it sort of on par with DeepSeek 3.1, with sort of the Kimi K2 models. And this is definitely a change that we've seen Mistral make here. In the past, they tended to compare it to models like Claude Sonnet when they were comparing their medium model, whether that was Claude Haiku when they were talking about their small models, or comparing to GPT-O Mini, etc. Those comparisons are gone, basically because the models from the frontier labs like OpenAI, Google, Anthropic really have gone to the next level in many ways. And you got to think that the companies that don't have the budget just aren't going to be able to keep up with that. In fact, if we come in here and look at the LmArena score, we see that going down, we need to go down to position 28 before we see Mistral Large actually even in here. Now, that said though, this is definitely one of the top open models. If we come down and sort by Apache 2 licenses, we can see now that the Mistral Large is right up there in the top open models and actually beating a number of the Qwen 3 models and only being just pipped out by the large MOE model from Qwen. So the benchmark comparisons that they've got in here are really very selective in what models they're actually showing. And you're going to remember that this current version is a non-reasoning version. They actually even make the point that a reasoning version is coming in the not too distant future. If we jump into the 3 Ministral models that we've got here, we can see some really impressive results that even the 3B is on par for certain tasks with the llama 312B instruct model, which is now quite old and actually like a previous generation model at this point. But one of the nice things here is just that these models exist. So while we're getting new models from DeepSeek, from Kimi, etc., they tend to be the singular, really big model that they're releasing. Even if they've got a reasoning and a non-reasoning version, we're not seeing smaller models from them. For the smaller models, in the past, we had lots of companies playing in this area. Now, a lot of those companies are just not putting them out. It's a while since we've seen one of the new Phi models, and certainly even longer if you wanted a Phi base model. And we've really only had Qwen that has put out a bunch of different sizes. We've had some new players like Liquid AI getting into making small models that are perhaps more focused for use on edge devices and phones and things like that. So it's nice to see Mistral jump back in this area with a 14B model, an 8B model, and a 3B model. And these are roughly the sizes where Mistral really shine, being the first sort of really good open model that didn't come from one of the big companies was their 7B model. And I definitely think we should be grateful the fact that they pushed, and with this release are still pushing, the whole idea that you should release the base model so that people can do their own fine-tunes, their own experiments to work out how to get the best out of the pre-training that went into these models. So looking at these, we can see that the 3B models are competing with sort of 4B models from the Llama team, from the Qwen team. The 8B models also competing with similar sorts of G models, and the 14B generally seems to be sort of either on par or just a little bit behind the Qwen 14B model. Although it does seem that the Ministral 14B does better at instruction following than perhaps some of those other models. And the same seems to be true when you look at the reasoning benchmarks in here. Now, those Qwen 3 models were released at the end of April. You gotta suspect that we've either gonna see a Qwen 3.5 or 4, perhaps towards the end of this year or early next year. And unlike Qwen, they're not telling us how many tokens that these were trained on or anything like this. I've yet to see a paper for these models. But even then, I still think it's really good to have these models to be able to compare. All of the models now are getting very good that you really want to have systems where you can compare models very quickly. I kind of feel that this is one of the things that people should be really focused in on, is having your own benchmarks for the particular app or use case that you're using the models in, and being able to test all the new releases to see what works best for you. So all of these models are actually out. We've got base model versions, we've got instruct versions for the Ministral, and we've got the reasoning versions for the Ministral. And along with the general releases, Mistral's also released a bunch of GGUF versions, so you can actually come in and try these out, and try out the different quantized versions of them. So overall, to wrap up, I think in many ways, people are going to believe what they want about this release. You're going to get some people who are going to say that Mistral is really focused on and is only relevant to Europe, where the EU wants to have their own models and have things that are built for that system. But personally, I think this release really shows that Mistral still is relevant in the open source space. They may no longer be able to keep up with the Anthropics, with the Googles, with the OpenAIs. But clearly here they've put out some solid models with both reasoning and non-reasoning variants. Don't forget, we've still got the Mistral Large reasoning model to come, and that's going to be really interesting to see how that compares to Kimi K2 thinking and the absolute latest DeepSeek models, etc. But the fact that they've released the base models means that you can run your own experiments on these and can try different fine-tunes for your use cases, etc. So as always, I'll put some links in the description where you can play with these. I'd love to hear in the comments what you think. Do you think that Mistral is still relevant today as much as they were 2 years ago when they were clearly the #1 provider of open models back then? Or have the Chinese models taken over so much now that really Mistral is just something that's focused on the EU and use cases for people who don't want to use the Mistral models? Anyway, as always, if you found the video useful, please click like and subscribe, and I will talk to you in the next video. Bye for now.
If you enjoyed this video, this is what we do here. Fast, clear updates on the biggest moves in AI. If you want to stay ahead of everything happening in this space, make sure you subscribe.